I don't think I've been as excited about making a video as I am today because we have got an astonishing bottle of whiskey. And without further ado, let me introduce to you a Macallan-Glenlivet from the 1940s. So this was bottled in the 1940s as a 22-year-old. So that means that it is from that legendary period when that 1926 Macallan 60-year-old was distilled. The same period of time that Macallan have just released a special video about that 1920s period, and we're going to dive into that a lot more later on in this video. But first of all, I've got a confession. The bottle's got a fundamental problem. I don't really know how else to describe a level that low. The level is shockingly low. But it hasn't always been like this. Obviously, it was filled with a higher level at some point in the future. But we'll put on screen now an image that the client sent to us before they shipped it from America to us. Because as we come down to this camera now, as you'll see, this is an American import, British American Importation Company Limited, Los Angeles. And then on the back here, you've got federal law forbids the sale or reuse of this bottle. And you've got your tax label underneath this rather healthy dump of parafilm. Now, that leaked in transit. The guy shipped a load of bottles, and there's going to be some awesome other 1940s and 50s bottles coming to this channel soon. But this unfortunately leaked in transit, which means that we've got to take some remedial action. We can't sell a bottle with a level that is that low, even if it is such a special and amazing bottle. But it does mean that we've got a rather good opportunity to do something that we don't normally do on this channel. So let's give it a go. Whoa, there we go. What have we done? I've grown my hair, changed my mic, and where's the whiskey gone? We've emptied the bottle, people. This now is a dead bottle, a deceased bottle. Here is the capsule. Let's take a look at that. We cut the capsule. And inside here is, oh my gosh, this is beautiful. Is your cork. Totally shriveled, and you can see why it was leaking now in transit, can't you? Because it was totally shriveled. But yeah, all the whiskey has now gone out of this bottle. So where has the whiskey gone, and why has it taken me about 6 weeks to do this? Well, the whiskey has magically, not quite magically, we'll get to that in a second, gone into here. We have now got some lovely 10 milliliter, super teeny tiny, 10 milliliter samples of this whiskey. So these are up for sale. They're going to be about £100 plus shipping. They're bloody expensive, but we'll get to that in a bit. But yes, the whiskey we managed to salvage about 30 drams out of this. Why has it taken about 6 weeks to do? Well, people, if you want to rebottle whiskey, like pour it from that bottle into drams and sell them, it needs to be done in Scotland at a facility that is on the spirits verification scheme. You also need to buy lots of diddy little bottles. You also need to try and find somewhere that sells these tiny little plastic shrink seals that go on the top. You also have to get labels printed, and then you also have to make and film a video. For all of those reasons, anyway, it doesn't matter. We've got 30 of these available to go and buy if you want to buy one. But there's a problem. We saw all that air in the bottle, didn't we? We saw it had a huge amount of air in the bottle because it leaked in transit. Does it make a difference? Yes and no. Yes. The original ABV of this bottle was 43%. As you can see here, it's 86 proof. That's US proof, and that translates to about 43% ABV. But our drams are labelled at 40.5% ABV. So we've lost a touch of ABV over the years. But, okay, whenever you buy one of these drams, you're going to get one of these little envelopes that come with it as well. They've got a new little fancy little wax seals on, aren't they cool? So you're going to get your letter knife. You're going to put your letter knife in here, and you're going to open the letter. Inside here is an image of the bottle that you are going to be consuming. And then on the back, is an excerpt of the tasting notes that Angus MacRaild did on WhiskyFun, and guess the score that he gave this bottle despite that low level. 93 points! 93 points. He says here, it's 93 points. And he basically says, we're still flying high, and I suspect a bottle with a higher filling level in good condition would be comfortably around the 94 to 95 point level, people. So anyway, it's phenomenal whiskey. It's in great condition. So if you want to try some whiskey that was distilled in the 1920s, in that amazing period when the 1926 60-year-old was basically produced, this is the one for you. But now that we've kind of covered all of that, let's take a look at what we're actually drinking here. So it's Macallan-Glenlivet. It's a liqueur Scotch whiskey. Again, if you read Angus's review, and again, Angus's WhiskyFun, his decadent drinks, whiskey sponge, great guy. He goes into a lot of detail about it's like a liqueur Scotch whiskey. It's slightly different to what you would expect from a single malt Scotch whiskey, obviously. But we're looking at a really interesting bottle here. The last one that we can find of these at auction, it was estimated at £6,000 to £9,000 for a full-size bottle. So this is where you come back to that dram being expensive. Is it expensive or is it cheap? It's expensive because it's £100 for 10 millilitres of liquid. £100 for 10 millilitres of liquid is a lot of money. But when you consider that the only other way to try this whiskey would be typically to buy a full bottle and drink it, which would cost you in the region of £6,000 to £9,000, the opportunity cost is quite low, even though the price is quite high. Now, these bottles were distilled during the tenure, or this whiskey was distilled, the bottles aren't distilled, is it? It's the whiskey. The whiskey was distilled under the tenure of Nettie Harbinson. She's the same one that oversaw the 1926 60-year-old, and Macallan have just put out a badass video in association with Bentley, because they're super premium nowadays, about Nettie, and it's a really good video. And I also think it was directed by Alan Scott, who is the director of the Queen's Gambit. I know we also used to work at Macallan, but we're going to talk about more of that on the channel at some point. As you can see here, it's an American import for Rowan Company. So it's an American import. It was imported, so it was bottled by Rowan Company, beg your pardon, and it was imported by British American Incorporation Company Limited, Los Angeles, and they were the sole distributors for Macallan at the time. And it's interesting, on the back of the bottle, it says federal law forbids sale of or reuse of this bottle. Now, for context, this whiskey was released in the US just after a few decades after Prohibition, the Great Depression, and World War II. So this whiskey was maturing and slumbering in Scotland through World War II. That's phenomenal. You know what I mean? Like, these bottles are time capsules. You know, if this bottle could talk and sort of say what it had seen, or the country had seen at that point, it would be amazing. It's also one of a very few it's probably one of the earliest age statement Macallans has ever been released. You know, 22-year-old whiskey at this period, 1940s, is pretty much unheard of. It's also weird. Why the hell is that label there? There is a series of these bottles, but this is basically a beautiful problem, an absolutely beautiful problem. And a big thanks to our friend Diego over at Bonhams in Hong Kong for pointing this out to us. These bottles, this is actually the neck label that should have gone onto the neck, but on this batch of bottles was incorrectly labelled with the neck label on the body of the bottle. So you end up with a strange looking bottle like this, right, with this round here. So a good way to look for fakes on these is to see where this neck label is positioned, because if you're putting the neck label on the neck as it should be, you're wrong, because the wrong way is the right way, and that is always the right way with whiskey, isn't it? So, the one thing that we've not looked at too much is the capsule here, because we've got a nice lead capsule. I think it's lead. Yeah, lead or tin, very thick tin. And you've obviously got your import details here on there. And that really is it, people. You can buy whiskey distilled in the 1920s and bottled in the 1940s. It's Macallan, and it's expensive. It's £100 a dram, but it does look quite nice. You get some gold foil on there. Don't you worry about that. But it's the opportunity. When do you get an opportunity to try something like this? Very strange circumstances in terms of it leaking in transit have led to this. Otherwise, it would have been sold as a whole in auction. So they're available now. Make the most of this opportunity. And you know what? Treat yourself.